We have been operating the Auckland Transport offices and also a lot of the frontline delivery with high levels of COVID protection in place, bearing in mind that we're at a stage of the pandemic where it is extremely broad, widespread, and inevitably people have been picking up COVID. A lot I've been hearing have basically been through the schooling system and children and households, and we have had very significant impact on our PT services in particular, and there's been some extremely good planning and very straightforward, comprehensive communication about how we're going to prioritise and deal with the cancellation. So, in any given day, we might have 13,000 services and 1,900 may have had to be cancelled, but we've made sure that there is still good service on those routes, even if the spacing between services is a little bit extended. And we have got in our public report some comment on the areas which have come under the most pressure. Because essentially people have had to be off either with COVID or because they've been isolating because of COVID in their households. The good news is that Auckland continues to track down in terms of cases and most importantly hospitalisation, because we all understood that this variety of COVID has had significantly less impact, but nevertheless there are still a lot of people getting very, very sick. The very high vaccination rates in Auckland, which are exemplary for the country, I'm sure have assisted in dealing with the impacts of this current wave of the pandemic. We all understand the very significant impacts it's had on our funding lines, and we have continued to have really important engagements with our funding partners, both Auckland Council and also Waka Kotahi, and everybody is doing the best they can within the limitations that they have got to make sure that we keep the show on the road. We have had significant delays in capital projects as people have been off working. It has been, off with COVID. It has been, there are just these little dots, but the significant increase in the cost of fuel, and in fact, what we see is major inelasticity. People will keep on filling up their cars and their vans and utes, notwithstanding the very high cost of fuel. Seeing the government reduce the level of Fed and RUC, which essentially does help reduce the otherwise increase of fuel. But they have backed that with a very significant program for 3 months in terms of public transport, giving a half price fare option. It has been, we have by far the most complex ticketing system and fare system and integrated transport offer for around public transport in New Zealand. And I'm very grateful to the AT staff who have been able to, at very short notice, basically bring in so that tomorrow we do have half price fares, whatever the fare category is. They're going to be half price rather than just some perhaps coarser approach, including dealing with the real challenges, particularly of the exempt ferry services with Devonport, which they're not funded those half price fares on Devonport ferry, and they are going to have to be funded and has been agreed to be funded by AT. It's just too difficult to unravel Devonport, which we operate as an integrated fare between bus, ferry and bus or train at the other end. So that has been an excellent piece of work. I know there's been a huge amount of work go on behind the scenes, and thank you for that. And I hope the people of Auckland take the opportunity of extremely good value, always great value public transport, but really amazing value, and get out at the weekends and all kinds of times, because half price is not something we can promise past the 3 months. Apart from that, we've actually got a very, as usual, a very full agenda for our open session and also in the closed session. So I will now just make sure that, first of all, are there any late items for the...
No.
No, okay. Can I now, just in terms of the interest register, which is set out in the agenda, are there any additions to that? Anything on today's agenda you have you wish to exclude yourself from because of a conflict of interest?
No.
No, very good. Now we've got the draft open session minutes of the 24th of February. Are they acceptable as a true and correct record of that meeting?
Agreed.
Agreed, thank you. Now moving on to the action register. We've got, I see we've still got the Transport Governance, Safety Governance Group coming to us. Are there any other comments on the action register? Very good. Well, let me now move on to the Chief Executive and his business report. Shane.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Madam Chair. Tēnā koutou, ngā mihi nui kia koutou, I te kaupapa o te wā, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou.
Kia ora.
Thank you, Adrian. We've got a pretty full day today, but there are a few things I want to call out. And Adrian, you have touched on the PT discount, and it's not included in the report. But I might just take a little bit of time afterwards just to flesh where we are at with that in terms of going live tomorrow and some of the work that's been done, because I think just to endorse what Adrian has said, there's been some fantastic work being done, and it's symptomatic of the organisation's broader approach to opportunities like this. But first of all, can I just highlight a few things in the report on page 1, starting at the beginning. We have processed the living wage adjustments. And that is in spite of not having an agreement with the PSA on a broader arrangement. We just felt that in the context of higher inflation, all those sorts of things, that we were putting, it wasn't fair to have those people under greater duress than they needed to be. So we just pulled the trigger on that. Just to give you a sense, it's not there are 13 staff that are in that category, most in customer services, and 1 parking officer. So it's not a huge amount of people, but it doesn't get in the way of the fact that that it was the right thing to do. In terms of road safety, I just want to call out that outside of what's in the report, there is some momentum starting to build with the delivery of Road to Zero. For those of you, this is central government's, equivalent of our Vision Zero strategy. And what is some of the things that we're now starting to see is the establishment of a deputy CEs group, which has been seeking endorsement at the moment. And the good news about that is AT is specifically called out as someone they would like to see a representative from in terms of that group. The group is looking to support effective delivery of directions given by the Ministerial Oversight Group and the CE Group, monitor operational performance, and establish and maintain relationships in order to deliver on that Road to Zero strategy. So good momentum starting to build. Look, Omicron and COVID, as Adrian has said, is something that we've just been dealing with. I guess one of the things we haven't been able to celebrate in the normal way that we would, and we're kind of thinking about how we might do that. But there are some projects that have been completed over the last 2 or 3 months, which we would love to give the opportunity to our elected members to cut a ribbon for, but also to celebrate with our teams the completion of those projects. And the most recent one is the Medallion Link Drive over in the North Shore, which is a growth project, enables housing, but is also a multimodal roading project, which all our roading projects are now. So just wanted to highlight that. Other projects you'll be aware of is Tamaki Drive Cycleway, and in the coming month or two, we'll also see the opening of Newland to Avondale shared path, which will accompany the work that Kotahi have done in terms of GI to Tamaki Stage 2. So quite a bit still happening, and just re-emphasises the efforts of all the agencies in Auckland to keep delivering in spite of the challenges. And I think so celebration, I think, is genuinely needed for the efforts that have gone in. So look, we'll be seeking to do belated we'll be seeking to take belated opportunities to celebrate that over the coming months. I didn't have anything else, but I did just want to further expand on Adrian's comments with respect to the half price fares. We are ready to go live tomorrow. That is has been, as I think, to quote others who might have said it, challenging but doable. And we've had to make some calls around, as Adrian said, some of the exempt services to make sure that happens. As Adrian said, we offer a huge array of different fare options which come with different eligibility criteria, and that expands to total mobility customers. And as part of delivering an equitable transport system, it was really pleasing to see that the offer was expanded to total mobility customers. All of those fares and concessions have been rigorously tested in the HOP system, so we're not expecting glitches tomorrow, but we will be stood up to be aware of or tackle anything that comes up. But as I say, these are the sorts of things we've done before, even though this looks different, but the team have done a great job. We've also prepared FAQs and prepared our retail channels to sell HOP cards at $5 instead of $10 to mirror the 50% reduction. We did contemplate zero price fares, but we are very conscious of the resolutions of council prior to Christmas that went with our $50 million support package around funding and managing cost and revenue. And in terms of comms, we've updated elected members March sent to you, communicated to 300,000 AT mobile customers, and they have given us ratings, usefulness rating about that information of 95%, and 900,000 Aucklanders have received an electronic newsletter from us. We've developed a fully integrated marketing campaign which will drive an active reconsideration of using PT for all Aucklanders and encourage first-time users to give it a go. The campaign will run across all media channels, including radio, outdoor, digital display, digital video, social media, kicking off on April the 4th with a full Herald wrap and featuring on 7 Sharp to drive awareness and have impact. That campaign will create a sense of scale and excitement that something big is happening, grabbing Aucklanders' attention with the 50% off the epic tap and go. We're also looking to drive a vibe in our stations to help drive a greater customer experience. We have the Edge Road runners set up outside the main entrance of Britomart Station, located on the plaza from 4 to 6 p.m. tomorrow, and they will have competitions and prizes and music playing as well. So lots of things happening, and we'll be continuing to source more support, consumer brand support over the coming weeks through MediaWorks, which will again drive awareness. We've also worked and offered other PTAs or the regional councils and Kotahi to leverage any of the creative that we've developed, and we've also ensured that the media output developed by both AT and Kotahi do not clash or attempt to talk over one another. We're estimating that over the 3-month period, Aucklanders will save around $10 million on their journeys on public transport. We're obviously funding's a key issue for us, and so we are working closely with Waka Kotahi, as was indicated in a previous meeting, to ensure we recover the costs that they are managing on, but eventually come out of the COVID-19 relief fund. As we previously touched on, going forward, we have a robust set of reports and research that will help us understand the impacts of this offer across the board and the take-up rate of those customers who have bought a $5 hop card. So, sorry, Adrian, I just want to expand on that, the scale of the work. I mean, a key fundamental of this is, clear oversight from people like Vanessa and Mark Lambert and Mark Lang, but it's really been about, for us, managing where we've needed to, particularly for Mark and Vanessa and I, the external environment, and there has been some, upfront, honest conversations we've had to have with some elected members and stakeholders, but otherwise getting out of the way of what has been a cross-functional team that are working really, really well together to get us to where we need to be. So, Madam Chair, that's where I'll finish. Happy to take any questions on the report.
Okay, very extensive report as per usual, and unfortunately the unavoidable reds which are coming through with respect to COVID. Wayne.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, thanks for the report, Shane. It's a great read to see what's going on. I just like to flag on Board Books 44, report page 25, CRL technology deliverables. I mean, that it's a behind the scenes stuff, but if this doesn't work, day one doesn't work when CRL opens. So I just wanted to flag there's a lot of things, complex things going on behind the scenes that just aren't on our radar normally, and they involve a lot of careful technical customer focused work to get right. So I'd just like to highlight that one. My other comment is probably in light of our earlier discussion around lumpy infrastructure investments are going to be difficult to maintain given current financial situation, but we're going to be asked to be doing a lot around our transport network to help people use other ways of getting around, and this report flags a few things like people travelling to and from school, promoting cycling. Another report we had is our work we do with businesses in terms of getting them to get their workforce to come to and from work differently. We're seeing a de-emphasis of peak travel to CBDs for offices and all those kind of things. So our system's going to have to become more flexible. And it's a long time, I think, since we've had a bit of a granular deep dive into all those things that we're doing as an organisation and get a sense of which ones could actually represent some levers we could pull a lot harder. Because I suspect that, dollars spent for change achieved might be a lot lighter in some of these areas than some of the big bang infrastructure approaches that we tend to focus on. So I think this is about getting ready for TERP. I think we've got that public engagement program being worked through, and we have to be able to follow up with something in terms of how our machinery works. So I'd like to promote that we dedicate some time to understand more in depth what the organisation is already doing to see how scalable it might be, with an idea of what it might be able to produce for us.
Yeah. Yes, that's very. I had identified. I'd forgotten about TravelWise, but yeah, some of these programs have been for a long time, and it would be really helpful to just to pick up the issue that you've talked about, Wayne. Just those kind of investments. Any other questions on the report? Mark?
Thanks, Adrian. Just two reflections. Wayne's picked up the CRL one, the technology one. I think it's just I don't know how and when we engage, but just our preparedness to, operate that asset as and when needed. you almost feel like we kind of need to walk alongside for a while fairly soon so that we're prepared for that.
Mm.
Now, the other reflection on page 30, just around the growth, we've had a lot of conversations about, the financial pressure, the perfect storm and the effect on public transport. What we haven't put into that conversation yet is just the growth pressure as well with from the unitary plan, the number of consents coming through, the intensification of housing, so many areas in the Auckland Isthmus, whether it's Beachlands, Drury, Kaipara, Albany, there's just some massive growth happening. And as I drive around, I'm really surprised at how much housing is going in. It's going to put pressure on us needing to build infrastructure and reinvent public transport. So I just think that needs to come into our psyche as we talk about the RLTP in the next 10 years.
Thank you, Mark. Mark, can I just comment? Sorry, Adrian. There is significant work being done in the organisation right now to kind of flesh out the scale of those issues, and I know Auckland Council is as well. We had papers come to the executive leadership team yesterday, which will, over the coming months, surface to the board. But it is kind of frightening in some ways to see the scale of the price tag that goes with it in terms of transport infrastructure alone. So, good call out.
Yeah, it's just the pressure is going to come from multi dimensions. I'm just pointing out this is one we need to be aware of as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Mark. Jim, and then Kylie.
Kia ora koutou. My observation more than anything else, Shane, is just to acknowledge the work of Te Ara Haipapa and the significant number of activations and the work that they're doing with Māori rangatahi to get licences. We take licences for granted, but they can be really significant in terms of opening up work opportunities, and I think it's one of the most practical, significant things you can do for young people is provide that chance, albeit we're in the public transport system business. It does provide access to a range of different employment opportunities and educational opportunities in particular. I was also pleased to see the work that's been done, Shane, with the marae safety program, in particular the work around construction of car parks and the like. And I know it's in a different section of the report, but also just want to acknowledge the commitment to supporting Māori businesses as well through the work of our social procurement team. And I think effectively every single construction project has been undertaken by a Māori business, apart from one in Great Barrier, I think, and there are obvious reasons for that. So well done. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Kylie.
Thank you, Shane and team, for the very comprehensive report and all the really good things that are going on. I just wanted to comment on the technology and what that's allowing us to do, particularly around customer, and also I've noticed the transit lane. We see later in the report where we've still got our road deaths, and I just wondered around the technology with cameras. Recently, there's been quite a bit in Queensland about use of AI and detection of mobile usage and also seatbelt wearing, which are two issues that are very important to us with our DSI numbers. And I just wonder how we are thinking about what we can use in that space. I think, was it Nyla Hassan who came in and spoke to us, talked about the use of technology and how we're looking at that for future benefits.
Kylie, I might just make a couple of introductory comments, and if Andrew's online, he might want to talk to some specifics. But from a AT perspective, it's something we've always, the board has always kind of endorsed, and we've always pushed, and to the point where it's cost us money for police, assets basically operated by police in terms of red light cameras those sorts of things. And we've always pushed our point cameras, and our technology team, as you called out, Kylie, are doing some phenomenal work. I mean, some of the things that they do, which is, you know, we're even got patents on, because no other transport agency in the world is doing, maybe not in this space, but in the special vehicle lane and T2. And so there are a lot of opportunities in that space, but we don't have to do it all ourselves. As you say, there's been work done in New South Wales around some of these things in Queensland. So huge opportunities. We have to drive it. It's kind of been us that has to lead on it. And I think it may come to a crunch, Kylie, where we're going to have a conversation with the police about the best use of the money that's being spent within the Road to Zero activity class in the National Land Transport Fund. But Andrew, is there anything specifics that you're currently working on at the moment that you'd like to share?
Yeah, thanks, Shane. Through the chair. There are a few things, Carly, that are probably worth mentioning, particularly as they pertain to road safety. I won't cover the ground Shane's already covered around special vehicle lanes and transit lanes and the like. We're undertaking a trial at the moment on Nelson Street, looking at point-to-point speed solution. So when I say we, this is a collective effort at AT, and Roger's on the line there. He'll jump in and let me know if I've missed anything or if I've got anything wrong. But we're working with BT to put a point-to-point speed solution in place there, and point-to-point being average travel speed over distance. So that's something we're piloting at the moment on Nelson Street. The team in BT have been looking for some time at video analytics and using video analytics for a whole raft of safety solutions. But some of the ones that kind of immediately come to mind is using video analytics to detect some of the distraction causation effects. So things like mobile phone use in cars is one that they've been looking into and seeing whether we can use video analytics for that sort of solution. That's a trial in process at the moment as well, in progress at the moment. Obviously, we've got all of the technology already deployed through our red light camera solution. Those all pick up red light infringements presently, but the technology deployed to all of those sites will enable us to also pick up speed enforcement. They're all been fitted out with radar technology and the like. So they've got the ability to do more than what they're currently doing, which is just the red light detection. At a point in the future, we'll be able to activate and turn on speed enforcement at those intersections as well. And yeah, I think the only other thing I'd say, and I've mentioned it to the board before, is we are looking at, and we're working closely with Waka Kotahi. We're in those conversations with them around the ability to roll out more rapidly speed enforcement cameras around Auckland. And whether that's how we go about that with them is still a work in progress, but using camera technology to get much better reach to service that speed enforcement effort across Auckland is another area that we're pursuing and in conversations with currently. So that's a fairly broad spectrum of some of the things underway. There are more, and I've no doubt missed some. But
no, that sounds great. Thank you, Andrew and Shane and Roger. That's awesome.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Could I just pick up the comment that Wayne made about CRL? It's probably been about 18 months since we've had an in-depth discussion of CRL. I'm thinking, can we program, and I won't say when, but in the next 3 months or so, we really do need a significant briefing on not only where the project's at, but particularly our commissioning planning. And that would hopefully be a presentation that includes both Kiwi Rail and ourselves, as well as the CRL project folk, because we do need to understand. I do know that there is a executive governance group who are basically around all of this, but it would be helpful if we had a specific briefing at the Design and Delivery Committee. And just picking up the issue, particular issue that Wayne raised, a good understanding of the risks, particularly the commissioning risks, and how that's all being managed, because of course from the customer perspective, they have no interest in the fact that there's several parties who are needing to plan and deliver one project when it comes to that new fantastic piece of infrastructure for the region. So that if you can make that as an action point, that would be helpful. Wayne, no doubt you'll engage with that in due course. If there are no other comments, thank you for your business report, Shane, and we'll now move on to the proposed speed limit amendment bylaw, tranche 2A.
Thank you, Chair. Kia ora koutou. I would like to, if possible, just provide the board with some broader context around the paper before you today. And then what I would like to do is hand over to Melanie Alexander to run through a little more detail and outline the ask of the board today. Before I do that, a couple of things. At the moment, I am battling a little bit of a head cold, so I apologise if my voice fades in and out occasionally. The good news is it's not COVID, thankfully. So that's the first thing. Secondly, if I could just introduce some of the colleagues that I've got joining me on the call today. So quickly run through a few names. Melanie Alexander, I think I've touched on already. Many of you know her. She's acting as our Group Manager Network Management presently. We've got Michael Brown joining us. Michael's the Road Safety Manager. We have Nathan Kamek in the meeting as well, and Nathan is the Program Manager for our Safer Speeds program. Teresa Burnett, I don't think needs any real introduction. Head of Strategic Communications is joining us as well. And I'm hopeful that Karina England from our legal team is online as well, just in case there are questions from a legal perspective. So those introductions out of the way, if I run through a bit of context, look, safety is a key strategic priority, both nationally and for us here regionally. With the National Road to Zero 2030 strategy, setting a target to reduce death and serious injury by 40%, or rather to save in the order of 750 lives and realise 5,600 fewer injuries over the next decade. This strategy actually requires us to establish safe and appropriate travel speeds across our network. The board will recall as well that in September 2019, you approved our Vision Zero for Tamaki Makaurau, which sets a target of 65% reduction in death and serious injuries by 2030, when compared to our baseline of 2017. Following the DSR results that we saw in 2017, when sadly 832 people either lost their lives or were seriously injured on Auckland roads, the board will recall that you commissioned a road safety business improvement review. That review was undertaken by Mr. Eric Howard of Whiting Moyne, and Eric was and is an internationally recognised road safety expert. In that report, one of the recommendations of AT was that we appropriately lower speed limits to bring safer roads to Auckland. And we've already embarked on that journey. The board will also recall that in 2021, early 2021, Mr. Eric Howard was once again engaged to come back and do a review of progress against that earlier review. This most recent review highlights AT's commitment to date to pursue a strategy and actions to substantially improve road safety outcomes, including safe speed limits across the network. However, despite the acknowledgement of the good progress made to date, one of the priority recommendations that remains in that refresh is for AT to accelerate the lowest speed limits program for Auckland on the basis of risk and to capture the very substantial further DSR reduction benefits available. This recommendation also goes on to call for stronger, and I quote here, stronger, bolder, and more ambitious direction from the board and the executive leadership team. I believe that Tranche 2 and the paper before you today, Phase 1 of Tranche 2 of AT's Safer Speeds program, responds in part directly to these recommendations. Now, while good progress has been made since 2017 with annual DSR reductions year on year through to 2020, unfortunately in 2021, there were 59 deaths and 529 serious injuries on our road network. That's a total of 573 DSR, death and serious injuries, which is an increase on our 2020 result by a little over 9%, if my maths is right. And unfortunately, it's the first time we've recorded a result that has us not on track to achieve our own Vision Zero target. In contrast to this increase on the wider network, roads where speed limits were changed on June 30th, 2020, have actually experienced, based on recent monitoring and evaluation, have experienced a 47% reduction in fatalities in the 18 months following the changes, and also a reduction in all injury crashes of more than 25%. Of that, serious injuries are down a little over 15%. This is tantamount effectively to a DSR reduction of 20% across these roads where speed limit changes have been made. So that suggests that our program is working and is delivering results, albeit that it is early days, 18 months in. I did want to point out that as a road controlling authority, AT is required by law to review and set speed limits that are both safe and appropriate for all of the roads under its control. In this context, safe and appropriate speeds means travel speeds which are appropriate for the road function, its design, safety and use. And I wish to highlight for the board that technical assessments in accordance with this rule and this requirement have been undertaken for each and every one of the roads where speed limit changes are proposed today. These assessments were peer reviewed by ABLE consultants prior to us bringing them to the board for approval to go to consultation, and obviously prior to going out for consultation. And I wanted to just remind the board that ABLE's findings were that, and I quote here, Tranche 2A is a robust and well thought out stage of the Safe Speed program with strong alignment to strategic documents and a sound methodology and application. That was ABLE's findings of Tranche 2A prior to going out to consultation. During the extensive consultation process and following a number of concerns that were raised predominantly by the Franklin local board around predominantly our proposed changes where we had roads going from 100 km/h proposed to go down to 60 km/h, we undertook a further review. So we brought in a further expert. This time we approached Colin Brodie. Colin is a nationally recognised road safety expert. And Colin reviewed all of those roads where we were proposing to move speed limits from 100 to 60. At the end of the day, Colin's assessment found that all of our assessments were sound, and he didn't recommend that we needed to change any of those technical assessed outcomes. So just to summarise, we've done 2 peer reviews of the technical assessments that have been done by our experts. And it's for that reason that I have high confidence in the credibility of the work undertaken by our team. Finally, I'd like to take a moment just quickly to reflect on the hearings process, which was undertaken as part of our consultation for this proposed tranche of speed limit changes. And I'd like to thank Darren and Abby for joining us and being part of that panel to hear those submissions. My reflection sitting on the panel, I found those presentations to be really heartfelt and many of them to be incredibly compelling, and even on occasion to be really challenging. There are some people that came and presented, and I shan't share any details, but on their personal experience where they've lost or seen loved ones seriously hurt or even worse, killed as a result of speeding. And I guess on reflection of all of that, while there were speakers both for and against our proposed changes, on balance, I think it would be fair to say that there was significant support and compelling significant support for the changes that we are proposing here today. So I'd like to leave the board with that context and quickly hand over to Melanie. Melanie will probably take about another 5 minutes just to run through our process in a little more detail and then highlight the ask of the board today, and then we can move to questions. Melanie, over to you.
Thank you, Andrew, Morena board. And thank you for taking the time to read through this extensive report and attachments. Today, I want to just build on what Andrew has said. In December 2020, the board endorsed the investigation of the next phase of the speed limit changes known as Tranche 2. And this report today is around that first part, which is Tranche 2A, which was approved for public consultation by the board in June 2021. And this report also highlights the results of all that consultation as well. Tranche 2B, phase 3, is currently open for consultation feedback and will be reported to the board later this year. To highlight, at the risk of giving more data, to those DSI savings that we found in Tranche 1, I'd like to highlight that we found a 71% reduction in fatalities and 25% reduction in serious injuries on rural roads. And this is against the background of increases on DSIs on the network. And the reason I raise that in particular is because a large part of Tranche 2A is around those further high-risk roads in our rural network. The proposal and the recommendation to the board today seeks approval of speed limit changes following the detailed assessment and independent review to 804 roads, consisting of 611 kilometres of road. It's a significant portion of our road network, around 8%, focusing, as I said, on the high benefit rural roads in Franklin, which is over 200 roads, Otara Town Centre, the residential area Manuira, covered by the speed management programme, and also roads where speed change investigation has been requested by the community, focusing on Freeman's Bay South and in Ponsonby, and a further number of roads surrounding 71 schools. I'd also like to give some assurity, as Andrew has to the board, that each and every one of these proposals and roads has been individually assessed. Each road has been visited and driven, and in many cases redriven following feedback from consultation and assessed against set criteria. And I'm happy for Michael to take the board through more detail of this assessment process if you find that useful. During the development of the proposal, you may recall we had a high level engagement with our project partners and stakeholders. And consultation was open from the end of September to the middle of November last year. And we've received 8,413 submissions, a significant number. We also received 11 submitters at the public hearing on the 25th of November. An extensive awareness campaign also surrounded that consultation, including 340,000 flyers and 200,000 emails. And this was backed up by a number of public meetings, and given the COVID restrictions, a number of these were online webinars. And of course, we continued our engagement with local boards. The feedback from that consultation highlighted that changes around schools were well supported. However, we had the greatest number of submissions surrounding that southern Franklin rural area. The report provides a summary of all this feedback, but in particular, I'd like to take the time to highlight the engagement with local boards, who also received verbatim consultation feedback to inform their formal local board submissions. 15 of the 21 local boards submitted in support of the proposed changes. 2 did not submit at all, as their proposals did not affect their boards. 2 did not express a consensus view, and 2 boards provided mixed views. These 2 boards, Howick and Franklin, supported some of the elements but also queried others. Howick supported a rather controversial, in terms of public feedback, Aviemore Drive proposal, but also requested that we reassess the school zone proposal around Mullane Avenue, Latham Avenue and Dilmore Avenue, and recommended a 40km/h speed zone. However, we have reassessed that and we followed Wakakatahi National guidance around 30km/h speed limit, which is a safe and appropriate speed for these roads, based on their design, risk profile, use and actual driver speeds. The Franklin Local Board has provided a significant amount of information to Auckland Transport. They provided road-by-road submissions that we have been reviewed by the assessment team and also independently reviewed. It should be noted that at pre-consultation engagement workshops, the local board highlighted a number of these roads and we reviewed them, and in the proposal for public consultation, we actually had changed our proposal for 9 roads and changes to speed limit from 60 to 80 kilometres for another 4 roads. Local board feedback to the proposed changes is mixed, and the team have reviewed and proposed the changes to the bylaw to reflect the consultation feedback and support driver compliance. We have also identified a further changes in the report for 12 further roads, including 7 roads where the recommendation is to reduce the speed limit from 100 kilometres an hour to 80 kilometres an hour, which was previously in the public consultation 60 kilometres an hour, to support driver compliance. Examples being Portsmouth Road and Tourist Road, where we've made these changes, which is also reflected in our New Zealand Police feedback during the consultation to assist with driver compliance on these roads. We also recognise that there has been a bedding in process for Tranche 1, and we are really pleased with the feedback that we received from County's Manukau Roading Police Unit that the safe and appropriate speed limits introduced in Tranche 1 have been adapted to by local drivers without major issue. So, in summary, we are seeking that the local board review these changes and resolve to make the speed limit changes as recommended to come into effect in stages from the end of June this year to the end of July, and pass the Auckland Transport Speed Limit Amendments Bylaw 2022 as drafted in Attachment 8, and approve the draft public feedback report to be finalised and released. And there are a number of noting recommendations in there reflecting the role of the Safe Speeds programme as part of the road safety interventions towards Vision Zero, the benefits from Tranche 1 of the bylaw, and the significant amount of consultation that's been undertaken, and of course to thank their submitters for their proposal, their input to the proposal. Sorry. Thank you. I'm happy to take any questions from the board.
Can I thank you for that, Melanie and Andrew, giving us that comprehensive briefing. Look, what I'd like to do is if I could just turn first to Wayne, because I know that Wayne attended another meeting with the Franklin Community Local Board yesterday, and then I'll move to the other questions.
Okay.
Wayne.
Yeah, thank you, Adrian. As you're aware, our Franklin board requested to talk to the board last week after they had received the report that's now on our agenda. And like Melanie, I'd like to acknowledge a lot of the hard work that the Franklin board has actually put into this process. They've put a lot of hours in and done a lot of work on it. The board didn't make a verbal submission to the hearing process, but I think after they received this report, they felt that they needed to address the board directly, and the best way of doing that was to have it offline. And that meeting was attended by myself and Kylie, and unfortunately, Adrian, you couldn't make it at the last minute, but we had a good discussion. The Franklin board emphasised that they are supportive of improving safety in the Franklin ward, and they also acknowledged that speed management is a difficult issue for their community, and it can be quite polarising, and that's reflected in the report you've got. There's a general support for improving safety, so long as it's not on my road kind of thing, and that's really what the board's, I think, grappling with, is that they're trying to find how to navigate this difficult process through their community. The board flagged that, we had Andy Baker and Angela Full James, plus I think one or two other board members there, and Deputy Mayor Bill Cashmore also attended the meeting. The major issue, as Melanie pointed out, was really those roads that have gone from 100 to 60, because it's such a big change in posted speed limit. And they did present, some visual slides on roads that would suggest that 80 might work rather than 60, just from the appearance of them on the photographs. And really the board was coming out that if these roads do not make sense to those people who are using them, then there is a problem. For taking the community with you in these safety measures. We've heard from Melanie that the technical analysis has been made and it's been reviewed and it's been confirmed, and where roads have been raised in public submissions, they've been tested again, and we're still and the report in front of you tells you that the technical conclusion is that the safety limit should be 60 on those roads rather than 80. Bearing in mind that we're for clarity and consistency of communication with those using roads, we're using 100, 80 and 60. We're not introducing 90 and 70 and a whole lot of other things. So sometimes there can be a bit of a gap between the 80 and the 60. We're also advised that the board has to act on that technical assessment, and maybe we can have confirmation, Andrew, that actually we are required to review, and we're required to act in accordance with that review. And I think I'd just like to have that confirmed. The suggestion of the board was that perhaps some of the roads that are being dropped from 100 to 60 might be able to be dropped from 100 to 80, where they make sense for the community, with some not too costly improvements to those roads. And on the basis of that, we sort of invited the board members to give us their hot list, which are the ones that they think we're out of whack with, or was hard to explain to the community, so that we could perhaps have a look at those. I think that was a bit of a hard request at short notice, and we got a long list. I think we got 48 roads from the board, which really, the message from that is that you've got a lot wrong, and it's unlikely that we have anything like that number that are sort of incorrect, if any are incorrect, frankly. So out of that meeting, I did have in mind that there might be some troublesome roads where we tested yet again whether the 60 speed limit was consistent with the function of that road, which is one of the things we're required to do. And if we felt that a higher speed limit was more in line with the function of those roads, then what was the alternative in terms of engineering up? Is it just lane marking? Is it a bit of shape correction or whatever? But whatever it is, it involves time and budget. And that's what I was hoping to get out of a short hot list, but it's 48's a bit hard to work with. So, and I don't know how this fits into a process. I don't even know legally whether we have to approve all this in one amount, or do we leave the chief executive some leeway for the executive to potentially readdress a few of these roads? But I don't. I suspect the work's been done, but no. In the board's come to us because they have a concern. They want the board to scrutinise it. I'm not recommending to you that we scrutinise 48 roads, but there may be a handful that would help the board, help us to persuade their community that actually this is the right thing to do, and we are not leaving any stone unturned to do the most sensible thing, both in their view and ours. So I'm sorry, Andrew, I'm passing the ball back. Is there another iteration that might make sense? There's another way through.
Wayne, that's a really, really helpful summary, to be honest. Thank you for that. I might respond to a couple of the points that you've touched on. So I will confirm for you that legally we have undertaken an assessment, as we're required to do, and that assessment has followed the defined process under the rule, and we have found that the speed limits on the roads that we've touched on in this report are not safe and appropriate, and therefore we are obligated to act in one of two ways. To set a safe and appropriate speed limit, which is what we're proposing today, or to undertake work on those roads to lift them up to a standard where a higher speed limit would be appropriate. Those are the two options. There is no ability for AT as a road controlling authority to choose not to act. And I would suggest that it'd be highly risky for us to opt to do nothing in this situation. So my feeling here is, and I stand behind the work that's been done, those assessments have been initially undertaken by road safety experts, peer reviewed before consultation, peer reviewed after consultation, both by independent experts, and then once again checked following consultation by our own team. So they've actually had 4 reviews. I stand by the credibility of those technical assessments, and I put to you that the speed limits we're proposing are the safe and appropriate ones. If the board has concerns, and I'd like to acknowledge as well the energy and the effort that the Frankton Local Board have put into, basically pushing the boat out for their community. We have had many meetings. I think we've on 5 or 6 occasions gone and met with Franklin and tried to work this through. We haven't gotten to where we would like to have gotten to. However, I would acknowledge that there have been changes made. Mel called them out prior to going to consultation on some roads where the limit was reviewed, revisited and lifted to 80. And then 13 of the roads that we're proposing in here today have also reflected changes based on feedback. So some changes have been made. If the board has ongoing reservations about Franklin's ability to support us and come with us on the journey, which probably to an extent I think it's fair to say we would share, the only way forward that I would envisage for the board is to add to our recommendation a requirement. So I would encourage the board to establish and set the bylaw as outlined in this report today, which fixes those roads at 60k. Following that, we would be comfortable going back to the board to revisit their hot list, work it through. I want to say there are some inconsistencies having seen that hot list, and I wasn't able to make the meeting yesterday. There are some inconsistencies with what was provided yesterday relative to what we've seen in the past, but I don't think the team would have too much issue with going back, looking at that hot list and trying to work with the local board with a view to coming back ultimately to the board with a potential suggestion around which of the roads possibly have merit to lift to 80 and what, from an economical perspective, will be involved or required if we wanted to move those roads to a level of 80k an hour, because it will involve physical works. And I would be surprised if that was cheap physical works. I am an engineer, and I'm comfortable to say that I doubt it would extend to just road marking and signage. There is likely to be geometric realignment required, shape correction that you've talked about. There are a number of roadside hazards on those roads that probably have to be mitigated or removed. That all comes at an expensive price tag. But we could go away and look at that, look at the list with the board, see if there are a handful of those that have merit to investigate further for engineering up and bring that back to the board. And that would involve making a change later on to move the 60 back to 80 on the condition that those roads are engineered up commensurate with whatever it is that the team find. So that is, as a suggestion, we could add that. If the board are so inclined, we could add that. I think Melanie's worked on a bit of wording that might be helpful if the board want to go there. But I would strongly advise that the decision today runs in line with the recommendations as they stand. Hopefully that's helpful, Wayne. I don't.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. Just a comment back from you, Wayne, then I need to go to Kylie and Darren.
I'd like Kylie attended the meeting, so could you go to Kylie first, please?
Kylie.
Yes, certainly. Thank you very much all for the intro and the explanations. Firstly, I just wanted to say thank you to the team. This is a huge amount of work. We have no idea how much work is involved, and it is very professionally put together. and the consultation, everything. So I just want to make my appreciation to the team to allow us to be in a position today to make a decision which will have a real impact on the safety of Auckland. I also want to thank the submitters. We've seen in that 900 odd pages the care and interest that people have gone to really try to be doing the right thing here. So that is very much appreciated too. For me, a key element following the meeting yesterday are a couple of things. One is in the board paper where it talks about the specific reduction in deaths and serious injuries in the Franklin area. Andrew, I think you quoted, or Melanie, you quoted 70% or something reduction in rural. I think in the board paper, you've specifically quoted figures for the Franklin area. So that interested me a lot. The second thing is that the level of technical assessment at each stage of the process and the methodology employed. So prior to consultation, changes have been made, the peer reviews. But for me, importantly, is the technical assessment post consultation and then the subsequent peer reviews. So that to me feels very robust, and I want to congratulate you on that. I have got one question though, and that relates to I think it's the 10 road. I know we've got 13 roads that we are changing, but 10 particularly. And it's really where you have gone, you originally recommended 60, and then I think you've gone to 80. So around the issue we're talking about. And I'm interested in, often it talks about improved likelihood of driver compliance within the new limit and improved speed limit consistency for road users. What I want to ask is, some talk about we might be making changes, but where we're not, how do we justify that it's safe and appropriate without necessarily undertaking certain physical works? So I was a little bit confused at the back. So I'll give you an example. Page 130 of diligence, and I'm sorry to be digging in here, but so I think this is Portsmouth Road. So I'm looking at the conclusion here, and it talks about based upon consultation. That's why we've re-looked at it. And the key information is there's a list of things. And it more talks about changes made to safe and appropriate speed on similar roads and review of crash units. I wanted to understand what we were doing on this road that changed it from 60 to 80. And I'm sorry to be digging deep, but that was my understanding of the whole rationale around this.
Thank you, Kylie. That's helpful. Mel, is the best person to ask Michael to speak to Portsmouth Road? Yep. Michael, you're on the call. Can you?
Yeah, I'm on the call.
Kylie, share around Portsmouth.
Yeah, I'm just trying to find the detail, Andrew. Sorry, I've got the Portsmouth one bay.
It's under the conclusion,
Yeah.
Mike.
Conclusion, process is appropriate speed, 80 km/h full length of Portsmouth. Based on consultation feedback received and further technical assessments, the speed limit is recommended to be updated from 60 to 80. Key information that driving this changed. The road is straight and there's good visibility. There's no development plans on the road. Changes made to safe and appropriate speed on similar roads nearby. A review of the latest crash data. So I think, without knowing the exact detail of it, I think Portsmouth Road will be one of those roads that would be right on the cusp between the 60s and the 80s. And so when the team have reviewed it and they would look at those, the technical assessment and seen the IRR rating, which may change because they've put it as a straight road as opposed to a arduous road. I would need to get into the detail and find out, but that's the process the team have really went through is where there's been those kind of grey areas is to look at them in more detail. And so there were other roads where The IRR score might have changed by 1 point due to it being, we said, twisty or a bendy road as opposed to an arduous road. So they've just tried to be more pragmatic around some of the feedback that's been received, on the basis that they would never compromise safety, and they would always go on the technical assessment that would give us the best outcomes. But in some cases, and I know Portsmouth Road was one which was raised by Franklin Local Board, and it was actually presented yesterday as one of the examples of a road that does look and feel like an 80 km/h road. So I know that the team have done that kind of additional due diligence just to check, but as I say, they wouldn't make changes to make it work. They would only do it if it made sense, and that they were comfortable that they weren't compromising the safety on the road.
Okay,
So,
thank you, Michael.
Carly, I want to try and summarise, and Michael can tell me as well if I'm wrong or right. But in essence, under the rule, there's a raft of processes that we've got to follow and evaluations that are done. It's a pretty absolute process. It's very prescriptive. And in some instances, you come out right on the cusp between a 60 and an 80 is what Michael's talking about in there, if that wasn't absolutely clear. This is one of those roads that comes out right on the cusp. And so I think that's important to recognise. That means in their expert opinion and the peer-reviewed opinion, we've recommended all along to go with 60. On the final outcome now, we've said, right, let's go with 80. I want to just highlight that in addition to that, we are proposing some changes to this road to support the 80. It's not a case of we've said 60 all along, let's flip-flop and go 80. We've said 60 all along. This is one of those roads that's on a threshold with some additional engineering measures, not costly, along the lines of signs and markings. We believe we can elevate this one into that 80 bracket. That is why we made the call to move to 80 on this one. But it does involve additional work, just to be very clear.
Thank you, Andrew and Michael. I guess this also demonstrates to me, Wayne, the extensive work that has gone on and thought processes behind every single change, particularly around those roads that we've received feedback on.
Thank you. It was a good question, Kylie.
Thank you. So Kylie, does that answer your questions?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay, Darren, Jim, then Mark.
Thank you. I'm probably just going to echo some thoughts now, as I was part of the public consultation, and much of this has been said. But one, thank you to the team. I too have been really impressed with the process, and it's been really helpful to hear this conversation, and Andrew and Melanie, around the obligation we have, the technical assessments that have been peer reviewed, to sit in those public consultations and hear the personal stories, and also the very constructive feedback and ideas that were received. And I have to say and want to acknowledge that we have heard them and that we have made some changes, which I think is really great to see. And it was really helpful, that last conversation, actually, to get the clarity as well around the different speed limits. So I just wanted to say well done. Thank you. It was a real eye-opening and sobering day to hear all of that feedback. It certainly helped me in my understanding. And I think we are balancing here an obligation, and we've done everything we can, I think, to hear the community and every board and take everything on board with that feedback. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. I think it's great work, and the success and the outcomes that we've had from the first tranche are just so strong. I think it should give us confidence that moving ahead, we would hope to see similar results, and surely the communities will be supportive with 70% type reductions in DSI and rural roads is really impressive. So yeah, I'm certainly supportive, and I appreciated being part of the process.
Thanks. Thank you, Darren. That's a helpful comment. Jim.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say thanks for your patience, Chair and colleagues. Just wanted to say, first of all, I was been very impressed with the presentation, Andrew, with the process that's been followed, and just echoing the sentiments of board colleagues and the comments that have been made. I think really positive to see the significant reduction in DSI and serious injuries, and I think it's a endorsement, a strong endorsement of this whole process and policy that's been implemented so effectively. And I also just want to acknowledge the peer review process you followed as well. And there was a part of the report that I found really interesting, which also identified that safety is a key consideration, setting speed limits, but it's not the only consideration. It's got to be taken into account of other factors. So you refer to the effectiveness and efficiency of the network and our statutory role contributing to an effective, efficient and safe land transport system. So it's not just speed limits in isolation. All of those things have got to be considered. I suppose the question really is, and this is what I'm a little confused by, Chair, is what is the role of the board in terms of this process? It's overseeing that it's a effective, robust process, that it's got independent review, that there's been appropriate levels of consultation that we've heard, and given ourselves confidence in all of those particular areas. But what I'm uncertain about is if we do get a direct request for consultation, for example, from the Franklin board, is it part of our role to actually go back and further require additional assessment of that? I suppose that's my key question at this point in time.
Okay. Well, can I just simply go to that? We've got a very clear recommendation here. You've set out very, very well what our role is, but it is also to approve the bylaw following consultation. We have had a proposal that post decision, which we have not yet got to, that the roads that we talk about, we can, of course, go back and see in consultation with Franklin what the scale of improvements would need to be to those roads to actually change their speed limit. So that's the proposition that Andrew Allen has put to us. And I think that was a useful way to actually describe that. So to deal with the issue today, but to actually provide an opportunity to really understand what the improvement works would be needed. And look, that's not going to be a fast process, but I think it's a good proposition. So we'll get to that when we get to the end of this item. Look, I'm just aware that time's moving on. I've got Mark and Nicole. So if you could ask your questions, I'd appreciate that, Mark.
Thanks, Adrian. Look, the context, I've got 3 quick questions, and the context is this is not going to be a universally popular decision. I appreciate it's a robust peer-reviewed process. It's pretty hard to doubt, but that's the context of my 3 questions. The first one, page 51, we note that there are 8,413 submissions. In the paper, I can't get context to what degree they were for, against, or neutral to the change. We mentioned about local boards and schools, but what was the overall public reaction to our plan? Because I don't think that's shown in this paper.
Yeah, and look, just Mark, a lot of those will be on individual roads or sets of roads, not to the entire concept. So what information can you give us on that, Andrew?
I can check in with Mel. Do you know the answer? Or Nathan, you're on the call. Do you know what the final outcome was on balance? Or
I can answer that, Andrew.
Thanks, Nathan.
Yeah, so we got a really extensive consultation response. So I'll turn my camera on too. As part of that, we did get 8,400 odd submissions. In those submissions, we did ask if you have a general sentiment for and against, what is that? The majority of people, around 60%, didn't provide a general sentiment, but they did provide their road by road feedback, which is basically the core of our assessments. There were some that provided general sentiment, and just looking at the paper as item 37, it's broadly split, so it's slightly more unsupportive at a general level than supportive, but I would note the level of submitters is around the 30-something percent, 38% of people provide that general sentiment. So I think it was interesting, but my reflection is when we actually went through and had to make these decisions, it wasn't really that useful to get that general sentiment. Like the road by road is where the absolute gold is, and making these making these decisions.
I think the context is half the population are probably going to be against it, half are going to be for it, roughly, by the sound of it.
Mark, can I just add some commentary there? AT has done, consultation brings specific, it's really useful in terms of some circumstances. In other circumstances, it has significant limitations in that you generally tracks some
Sorry, Shane, we've actually lost you.
Can you hear me now, Adrian?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, sorry. So, sorry, Mark. So there's been limitations with consultation, as you'll be aware from your years of experience with Waka Kotahi, in that it attracts some segments of our community more than others. We've always sought to supplement that at AT with representative surveys of the views of Aucklanders in respect of speed limits bylaws, speed limit setting, and what that brings. And what it clearly shows is that the representative surveys, and these are 600 to 1,000 Aucklanders, and we've done it more than once, we've done it over time, and it shows that the level of support is higher than what will come through in consultation generally. So okay. The consultation result is what it is, but I did want to make you aware that the broader kind of more representative.
Look, I'm just aware of time. So that is the statistically relevant surveys of the entire population, Mark. Okay, so we've got, anything else, Mark?
Yeah, look, the two other quick things. The second one was on page 53. I won't dive down the rabbit hole now, maybe offline, but on point 16, you talk about the deaths last year was 60% higher than the year before. You combine that with a stat that on the roads that we changed, there were 47% reduction in fatalities. So because there are less kilometres driven in a COVID world, the number of deaths in relative terms has probably doubled, which includes a whole lot of roads where there's a 47% reduction. So there's something massive fundamentally changed in the DSI stats on our roads, and I don't understand that. So
Mark, maybe I can explain that for you. The first tranche, we only did about 10% of Auckland's roads. So that benefit has come on 10% of the network. There's still 90% to be treated.
Right.
And the 90% is where the kind of really adverse trend is happening. So it suggests that actually we've got to move faster in terms of speed limit changes if we want DSI reductions.
Okay, thank you. And then the attachment 7, which is those 13 roads that have been changed, most of those look like they've been in the Franklin district where we've had a direct local board connection. If the other 20 local boards had a similar challenge and connection to us, would this be extrapolated out into another 1 or 200 roads?
Mark, I think it's fair to say that we've taken all of the feedback and revisited assessments where appropriate. So it's not unique to the Franklin local board. It just happens that majority of the roads where we're proposing changes are in the Franklin local board area. So that is why the outcome is skewed towards Franklin local board. It's probably fair to say. But we have scrutinised all of the feedback that's come through on a road by road basis. It's not that any special treatment's been afforded any one entity. I would like to suggest that the team have looked thoroughly at all the feedback that's come through, and it just so happens that in that final overview, those are the 13 roads where we believe change is warranted.
And I'm not inferring anything. It just seems a coincidence that all the changes are in the district where the local body or the local board has been more active than the others.
Yeah,
I think it's the nature of this particular tranche, Mark. If you look at it, it is actually quite a mixed bag. So around schools, for example, quite different to rural roads in Franklin. Any other comments, Mark?
No, thank you.
Okay, Nicole.
Hey, just really quick. I mean, first of all, just congratulations to the team for a very robust piece of work. I think it's been replicated internationally. We're showing it nationally. The evidence is overwhelming on this. So you've just revalidated that with the work you've done. But there's been lots of things that are evidentially very clear that never get done because of the politics and the lack of social license and buy-in. So I would say the imminent risk this board needs to consider is the lack of social license and the lack of political support for this decision, and the threat to this board and to the organisation's integrity should that political license not support the decision that's being made here. And I think that is the issue for New Zealand. So just how have you thought about that issue? How have you lined up the mayor, the deputy mayor, the councillors behind this decision, and what leadership will Auckland get from a political level to back the position that I think the team has done a tremendously good job on putting together?
Yeah, I would just make the comment, Nicole, that the Auckland region does, bearing in I do hear what you're saying, but nevertheless, there has been very strong support for speed management in the Auckland region. We're doing the hard stuff, going into the rural areas. That is the reality right now. Shane, did you? And I think there are some issues with respect to how this gets rolled out, and that's of course is also dealt with in this paper, and the message around the benefits of this. Shane, did you have any other comment to make?
Yes, I do, Madam Chair. Thank you. So, Nicole, look, it's a really good question in terms of what you're seeing nationally. Through the first tranche, we had, I think, I'm not sure it's 100% accurate, about 13 of the 21 local boards submit 100% supportive, general support for it. We had a lot of support from Councillor Darby, Councillor Coombe, and I forget Louise's second name, from the Rodney local board, which was rural. So big support through that. And in fact, the social license element was probably more challenging with the first time we did it than this time. But I don't have any sense of complacency about what we're doing now. I guess we have the benefit this time of the results actually proving what we've done, and so there will be there is an ongoing effort that needs to be made to keep retaining that social license, which is why we keep publishing the results and have been very transparent about our monitoring and performance. I think we are, let's be clear, Franklin rural area is similar, I would say, to some of the areas that Waka Kotahi is dealing with in terms of some state highways. So I don't doubt that, and I fully support Andrew's. I think he's done a great job today, but I think I fully support Andrew's position, and if there is an alternative where we can work through with Franklin local board over the coming months and years in terms of what are really the hot list and what is the opportunity or cost and the economic impacts of engineering up, then I'm be comfortable to do that.
Okay, Wayne, if you've just got one last comment.
Yes, I have, Andrew. I just wanted to pass on that part of the discussion yesterday was a concern about people who've been driving on these roads for 100k limit for 50 years they've owned a farm, and all of a sudden it becomes 60. And so it's going to take a little bit of management around that hot list, that there is a phasing in education type process. I don't know what's involved in that. Could be the odd sign on the side of the roads, hey, you're doing 80, not 60 kind of thing. But that was quite a point that they were raising, was that this is a big shift for some people who live and regularly travel on those roads. So that would need to be picked up in the management of the hot list. It's the same set of roads. Yeah. Well, I would thank you for your offer to do that. I would support it. So.
Okay. Look, I just want to wrap this up. There is there's an element of very significant change, I think, particularly probably in the Franklin community, but we've had very wide support for a lot of the changes which are being proposed. We've actually had a number of communities who have come and asked for speed management. Speed management, we have seen a very disturbing increase in deaths in particular, but also serious injuries on the Auckland roading network in the last 12 months. The AT board gets a notification of every single death on our transport system. We read the contributing factors. It is actually very upsetting and disturbing to read how often simply taking your foot off the accelerator would have actually resulted in significantly reduced trauma, and in many cases would have avoided death. Something as simple as that. Now, we are trying to actually create a system which is inherently safer, where everyone gets used to actually driving to the conditions, essentially with the simple little sign that gives you a speed advisory, which basically relates to the capacity of that road to deal with the mistakes and the hazards that people just always introduce. And we just simply do not have the funds to be able to build our whole transport system within the capacity of the latest, safest vehicle and the most fantastic, safest driver. We just do not have the funds to be able to do that. And so, look, this is one of those things that we're having to do within the reality to actually address serious deaths and injuries. And there will be an element of change, and we're already seeing that there is going to need to be an ongoing, not only social license and communication, but actually an ongoing discussion, particularly with the Franklin Local Board. I think Wayne and Andrew have pretty well described the note that we need to put into the resolution, that we will actually go back to the Franklin Local Board, having actually addressed the immediate issue, which is to create a safer transport system through speed management in that part of the region, and actually deeply understand what we need to do essentially around engineering and other treatments to be able to safely increase, and without a big bucket of money at this stage, but nevertheless, if you don't know, you can't start to prioritise. So I think we do need to have that note, the wording of that. Can I ask, Wayne, that you just check that before that comes back to the board? But with that addition, do we have agreement to the notes and to the approval of this draft of the speed limit changes as set out in the recommendation? Agreed? I'm getting yes. Everyone. Yep. Thank you. Thank you. Well, we don't underestimate both the work and the ongoing work behind all of this, including a very significant rollout program. Can we now move to the next item on the agenda, which is the Eke Panuku and AT collaboration? We'll take the paper as read. This is a great piece of work which has come out of, I know, the CCO review, and a request that the CCOs find ways of working not only more collaboratively, but actually a lot more effectively together. And I know that a lot of practical work has gone on between Eke Panuku and AT with respect to particularly transit orientated development, which is obviously is a plus. One of those delivers in so many ways. So who's handling this? Is this Andrew?
Yep, that would be me, Chair. Yeah, so thank you very much and welcome to our Eke Panuku colleagues. I think we've got David Rankin, Chief Executive, Joe Glaswell, Head of Corporate Affairs, and Marion Webb, who's the GM of Assets and Delivery. Unfortunately, I think Ian Wheeler was due to join us as well, but he's absent with COVID. And then from AT, we have Jane Small, Christina Robertson, and Murray Burt, hopefully. So this is a noting paper, as you've articulated, Chair, to provide an update on the significant and growing areas of collaboration between our two organisations. I'm going to pass over to Panuku shortly to provide some practical examples, but just want to call out quickly 4 key areas as noted in the paper. Firstly, the establishment of the Joint Partnership Steering Group, and that's co-chaired by an AT and Panuku executive leadership team member. The Behaviours Charter, which is being co-authored by both organisations to embed how we operate together on joint projects. The fact that we have twice yearly joint executive leadership team meetings now, where we discuss how to collaborate more constructively. And then finally, the fact that we're going to recruit a strategic relationship manager to support the Joint Partnership Steering Group and the Forward Work Programme. But on that, I might pass over to David and Joe and Marion from Eke Panuku, please.
Thanks, Andrew. Thank you for inviting us to the board meeting. As you noted, Ian Wheeler was going to be present this morning, but he's off with COVID, as are another couple of members of the ELT, unfortunately. As Andrew noted, one of the originators of this piece of joint work was the CCO review, but I guess even aside from that, Shane and I had started a discussion during 2019 about the, I suppose, puzzling story of how two organisations which have so much of a shared vision around quality intensive development leveraged off huge transport investment had really had a pretty mediocre track record of working together over the years, and the recognition of the fact that there was this historic systemic problems really between the two organisations that were quite deep. So in early 2020, Shane and I initiated quite a significant piece of work, which is summarised in the report. We used the customer experience design team at AT to help us with the sprint process, and that's was an enormous plus for the way this has progressed. It's involved a lot of people from both organisations, but I would acknowledge the fact that there's a relatively small group of senior people that have put a huge amount of personal effort into this, and they're all people with a lot of mana in our respective organisations, and I'm sure that's made a big difference. As much as anything, the focus has been on really trying to bore in on sorting out the barriers to, and then creating a genuine culture of working together and building relationships that would go far deeper than just the me and Shane relationship. And then to look at the sort of supporting processes and structures needed to get things to work a lot better than they had in the past. Where we are is not a finished product, but a very good foundation has been laid, which goes deeper than, one or two people, which is the positive thing. You've seen there a bit of a list in the report of the kind of things we're working on, but I guess one of the central things to sort of put on the table, which we got, identified early in the debate, is really pretty much anywhere where Eke Panuku is working well, overwhelmingly they're on the rail line, and if they're not, they're like Northcote and Takapuna on extremely good bus services. So our work couldn't be more closely aligned if you look at what everyone is doing in the council group. So I'm really positive about where we've got to. I've obviously been here in various roles all through the 10 years. I remember back pre-2010, and people like Adrian and Wayne will know, even when you had things that we do and things that Auckland Transport does within a one council structure, there were still tended to be lots of different cultural challenges and drivers to getting people to work together. So I think the fact that we've now got this relationship between the two CCOs on a good footing is very positive, and over time is going to produce some results that we're going to be proud of. Happy to take any questions, Chair. Comment.
Wayne.
Yeah. Thank you, David. Good to see you again, even if it's remotely. So, question back to you and Shane. Have you seen any first evidence of this starting to work, where it's you've been really pleased with the result?
From my perspective, I'd answer that in two ways. One has been that there has definitely been more progress on some of our issues and the locations that we're working in now. The program that we have in suburban Auckland, as distinct from the waterfront, has reached that point where we are implementing a lot of things. So it's been good to enable with more effective work between ourselves and AT to progress things in places like Palmyra and Manukau that were barriers. The second thing is that, without going into too much detail because of the fact it's still a work in progress, but we have started working together on the urban redevelopment opportunities with the Eastern Busway in a very different way than we have done in the past. So I think it will be a pilot of much different ways of thinking, working together right at the start, and then working together as we go through it.
Thank you, David.
Thank you. Any other questions? No. Okay. Well, it's always great seeing you, including you, Joanna. I did have a discussion with some of the leaders here, and as I said to them at the time, there couldn't be anything that I would be extremely surprised if there was anything radical that you could propose to the board that we would not be supporting. With respect to getting, we're just right now at council committee on our parking strategy, proposing things such as taking parking away from the curbside. So we are quite used to thinking about the fact that we have to repurpose all of our urban space in Auckland for a much bigger population. And I know that's the work that you do. Okay, so thank you for that. We have now got we've got a couple of items for noting, which have been attached to the actual agenda. Is there any general business? I don't think there was any. So we will now close this meeting and we will reconvene at 12:15.